Did you know Fast Growing Trees is America's largest and most trusted online nursery with thousands of trees and plants and over 2 million happy customers? Whether you're planting fruit trees, adding privacy, brightening things up with flowers, or bringing in houseplants, Fast Growing Trees has it all. Even better, they can help you find options that are right for your climate, your space, and lifestyle. Click Order Grow. Every plant arrives healthy with the Alive and Thrive guarantee straight to your door. So if you're ready to get planting, this is the moment. Right now, they have great deals on spring planting essentials, up to half off on select plants. And listeners to our show get 20% off their first purchase when using the code WWO at checkout. That's an additional 20% off. Better plants and better growing at fastgrowingtrees.com using the code WWO at checkout. Fastgrowingtrees.com, code WWO. Now's the perfect time to plant. Let's grow together. Use WWO to save today. Offer is valid for a limited time. Terms and conditions apply. Go to growingfasttrees.com for details.
You're listening to this podcast, so I know you've got a curious mind. Here's a helpful fact you may not know yet. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $900 on average. Pop over to Progressive.com, answer some questions, and you'll get a quick quote with discounts that are easy to come by. In fact, 99% of their auto customers earn at least one discount. Visit Progressive.com and see if you can enjoy a little cash back. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $946 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2024 and May 2025. Potential savings will vary.
Today's episode of Unbiased Science is in partnership with the American Cleaning Institute. Welcome to Unbiased Science, where we bring scientific method to the madness. I'm your host, Dr. Jess Steyer, and today I'm here solo, although I have a special guest. Sarah is not joining me this week. She'll be back next week. But we are going to talk all about microplastics. In particular, we're going to address the millions of messages that we receive about common household products. Do I need to toss this? Are laundry pods safe? Are dishwasher pods safe? All the things. So we're going to get into it today. But let me set the stage here. So microplastics are everywhere right now. They're in the news, they're in our group chats, in our anxiety spiral, and some of that concern is warranted, right? The science on conventional microplastics is legitimate and absolutely worth taking seriously. But the anti-plastic panic has gotten so broad that it's being capitalized on by brands making a fortune selling you quote unquote natural and plastic-free alternatives with weaker evidence and often their own funding interests buried in the fine print. The behaviors that people are adopting in the name of environmental protection are sometimes making things worse. So, for example, hand washing dishes instead of running the dishwasher sounds responsible, but the research is pretty clear that the way most of us do it, this is how I do it with the tap running the whole time, that actually uses more water and generates more emissions than just loading your dishwasher. So, it seems like we've let that anxiety get the best of us, and we're not really turning so much to the evidence, but today we are turning to the evidence. So just really quickly, I want to say that just this morning, I was on a group chat where someone shared an article that's gotten picked up over microplastics. And the consensus among the scientists on the chat was, yes, of course, we want to reduce microplastics where we can. But the amount of media fanfare about them when the methods that were developed for measuring them were pretty specific for detecting them in water specifically, not air, not food, not our bodies, not the environment. That's a big issue. There's also signal contamination, the brain studies that get picked up by the media a lot. I see our guest is chomping at the bit here. We're going to get into it. But the brain studies are actually particularly concerning and taken out of context. So, and then also last week, the EPA moved to designate microplastics as contaminants in drinking water. So this is all over our feeds right now. All right, I'm just about to introduce our guest, but we do want to let you know that we partnered on this episode with our friends at the nonprofit, the American Cleaning Institute, who share our commitment to science-based public education, and they are sponsoring this episode. But as always, we maintain all editorial and scientific control. The questions are ours, and we are always transparent. All right. Our special guest is Dr. Joe Zagorski. Dr. Zagorski is a toxicologist at the Center for Research on Ingredient Safety, CRIS, at Michigan State University, where he specializes in the science behind consumer product safety. And he recently published a deep dive into microplastics on PVA specifically. We're going to talk about that. That cuts through a lot of the noise. Welcome, Dr. Zagorski. Joe, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's good to be a part of the conversation.
So, all right, let's do a quick gut check with you before we get into the details. So when you hear that someone is concerned about microplastics in the world and the water and the ground and everyday products, concern over how it might be impacting their children's health, what is your first instinct? Is that reasonable fear, or do you think it's fear that's outrun the evidence?
Yeah, so I think realistically, my first instinct is empathy. And that is because a lot of times information or misinformation, depending on where you're looking, has been a bit weaponized or taken out of context, giving somebody the benefit of the doubt. And the result of that is an internalization of fear and sometimes of blame, even of self-blame. And so I first approach it from a standpoint of I understand why these headlines sound scary. I understand why the unknown is causes you to be apprehensive. And then I try to kind of take that from a point of I see you, I hear you, to a point of, well, let's look at what actually is occurring. Looking at microplastics or polyvinyl alcohol or plastics in general, I would say from all the information that I've seen, and at this point I've had to look at more of it than I probably wanted to initially, the available information and scientific conclusions have been well outpaced by media narrative and social media presence. And so there's, I would say at this point, specifically with microplastics, we don't know more than we do. So we always refer to, and I've heard you say it all the time, that how the dose makes the poison, right? It's the central dogma of toxicology. Everything can be safe or harmful in the right amounts. It doesn't matter if it's oxygen, if it's water, if it's cyanide. Looking at it through that lens of understanding that it's not just detection that determines safety, it is how much you're exposed to, the route you're exposed, et cetera. I think that with micro nanoplastics, there's more questions at this point than answers, because the ability to detect does not mean that there needs to be concern. It just means that we need to do more work.
Love that. And thank you for reiterating that the dose makes the poison. So, okay, I think that a lot of the confusion actually stems from people not knowing what we're even talking about when we say microplastics. So can you just start with the definition?
Yeah. So, and this is probably for some listeners going to be a little bit inconvenient. There's not a single definition. Whether it is the definition of plastic or micro nanoplastics, there is a bit of a disagreement in the field, based, some stakeholders think that source should matter. Is it human made? Is it natural? Whether we're looking at size or we're looking at source, different stakeholders have different opinions. So some believe that whether or not it is human made or if it is naturally derived, that should matter. But I will say this, your body doesn't care if it is human made or naturally derived. It cares about chemistry and biology. And so if it comes from a plant or it comes from a laboratory and it can interact with your body, it will. Also, there are some that believe that we should just be looking at size. So in that regard, a lot of people look at 5 millimeters down to 1 micron as a definition of a microplastic. So you can think 5 millimeters would be like the size of a pencil eraser. 1 micron might be like a grain of sand. And then smaller than that would be nanoplastics. Uh,
Okay.
and so nanoplastics would be, 1 nanometer up to, 100 nanometers or 1 micron.
Hmm.
Put that in perspective. The width of a human hair is about 70 nanometers.
Wow.
So 1 nanometer is 1/70th of that.
That's real tiny.
So pretty small. And so because of different detection methods and difficulties therein, there just isn't one set definition for it, which makes it honestly sometimes really hard to talk about
Right.
because it allows for people to talk past one another. Generally, the public thinks when they hear the word plastic, they think maybe a water bottle, maybe a pipe in the ground, maybe a hairbrush or a comb or fill in the blank. But
Yep.
they're thinking of things that are inherently not seen as natural,
Right.
that don't break down, and that are seen as non-environmentally friendly.
Correct. Right.
So, but in reality, what a plastic is a polymer, uh, which is made up of building blocks called monomers. The prefix mono meaning one,
Right.
poly meaning many.
Okay. So let's talk about it. But all right, you're talking about things like dissolving in water. So basically, though, there are different this is a massive umbrella term. It sounds like microplastics. But that being said, it's safe to say that some of these microplastics do end up in our bodies,
Yep.
and in the environment and the water. And yeah. So can we first, I'm curious about, and this might be too general of a question, but broadly environmental impact, and then what do we know about microplastics impact on human health at this point in time?
Those are great questions. And let me first say that we can detect microplastic particles everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
in the air, in the soil, on the poles of the earth, everywhere. So they're pretty ubiquitous. And so in that regard, it is reasonable to question, are they having an impact on the environment? And there is some research that under some circumstances suggests that maybe there may be some aquatic effects. Although I think it's important to point out that the science is very unsettled on this at this point. Not that we can detect them, because we know we can, but as far as does detection result in an adverse event, which means just something negative happening. And so we have seen situations where it's detectable in some marine life, in soil samples and water samples, but we really don't know what that means big picture yet. And so, and the same goes for human tissues. And so we know that we are exposed. And actually, contrary to what a lot of individuals that I've at least anecdotally interacted with, contrary to what they think, it's not actually through our food or our water that is our primary route of exposure. It's air.
Air. Oh my goodness.
And so I'm sure the shirt I'm wearing has synthetic fibers in it.
Right.
The carpet in my office, I'm sure, has synthetic fibers in it. As we use tires on cars, all of this puts these nanomaterials up into the air and we breathe it in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that isn't to say we aren't exposed other ways. We are exposed through ingestion or through our skin sometimes, although much less. But the primary route is air.
Interesting. Okay. So then a follow-up question, because I have said, based on the literature that I've read, exactly what you're saying right now, that we don't have a whole lot of evidence that microplastics are harming human health.
Yes.
But then the response is always, but, isn't it better to err on the side of caution and just get rid of plastics as much as we can? What would you say to that?
I would say that in a perfect world, maybe, but that's not the world we live in. So a lot of times when we have to make decisions on whether it's ingredients or approaches, you're very infrequently left with a perfect choice. A negative about plastic is we know that it accumulates in the environment.
Right.
Look at the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It's
Yeah.
mostly plastic.
Horrific.
Yeah, I'm not arguing that that's a good thing. But what I am saying is another problem with plastic is it's really stinking good at doing its job. It's durable, it's cheap, it's lightweight, and it's extremely versatile. And so finding a solution that can replace that is incredibly hard. Some individuals might point to, well, let's use glass containers. Glass is expensive to make. Honestly, the silica is to make the glass is not a renewable resource either. It's incredibly heavy. It's not durable. And so you end up with higher production costs. You end up with, in some instances, a higher economic impact because you have increases in carbon production just to transport it. And so you're left with a situation where maybe you have something that's also not environmentally friendly, and then additionally can't do the job as well.
Totally.
And so it's a really complicated problem.
The glass example, I just got my daughter one of those glass, drinking bottles. Day 2, she shatters it.
Yep.
And so then there's that whole other side effect. But I will say, so I personally take sort of a practical approach where I'm not going out and like throwing everything that's plastic out of my house. First of all, that's impossible. I couldn't do that. But I will say, as my plastic cutting boards are looking shabby, I'm replacing them with wooden cutting boards. As water bottles, time to retire them, I'll replace them with metal ones. But to your point, there are absolutely, we don't think about everything has pros and cons, right?
Yeah.
So really, really important point. Okay. So I mentioned this commercial angle. So I'm seeing so much of this greenwashing, right? Where companies are using these marketing buzzwords, natural, clean, or plastic-free alternatives. These are typically more expensive, right? I see that when I go to the store. But I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that? How much of this public panic over microplastics are being maybe driven by those companies?
Well, I can't put a percentage on it, but I have seen it, put it that way. So, for instance, not to go back to the polyvinyl alcohol piece, the PVA piece, but even a lot of the fervor that started around this started from an instance where a company with skin in the game published a paper that was suggesting, actually it didn't even suggest it, it outright said it, that this is of environmental concern, we should care. That then gets picked up, that then through the benefit of social media algorithms goes viral, and here we are. And this isn't unique to plastics. You can see this in any industry because capitalism is looking for an edge, right? So people have wares that they want to sell, and they will look for an edge to do so. So whether it is saying all natural, which by the way, some of the most toxic things in the world are natural, or whether it is saying plastic free, or these things that on the surface look great, because that's what ultimately, as a parent, just a consumer in the market, I want myself and my loved ones to be safe. And so they play into that and get you to buy something that is not a regulated term. So saying plastic free, well, what does that mean? We already covered that plastic is a broad term. So are we talking only human-made plastics? Are we talking plant-based plastics? Are we talking about biodegradable or non? It can't be regulated because the term itself is too broad. And so it absolutely is taken advantage of and used to make a lot of money.
I can't even explain to you. The word clean is the biggest bee in my bonnet. What does it mean? What does it mean? Yeah. But anytime, like I listen to other podcasts and all of the ads are, it's clean, it's non-toxic. Yeah. These are marketing terms.
Yeah. Or all natural, or organic, or
Yeah,
Like, if
maddening.
it's not USDA organic,
Yep.
it's not
It
regulated.
means nothing.
It
Right.
means nothing. And
Right.
so,
Yeah. Yeah. We could go on and on about that. But okay, so my understanding is that your group at Michigan State, the ingredient safety group, didn't you recently address this issue? Was it dishwasher pods, laundry pods specifically? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
yeah. So, we have a blog that comes out every Monday, Tuesday. So subscribers get it a day early is really what it amounts to. So if you want to subscribe, you'll get it on Monday. If not, it'll be on our website on Tuesday. But we try to address questions because they don't know what a lot of scientists know because they've not gone to school for way too long. We want to address these questions in a way that is approachable and digestible for an average consumer, someone who hasn't, spent a decade trying to learn about toxicology.
Right.
And we saw increase in interest on specifically pods, whether it's in the dishwasher or whether it is in the washing machine. And a couple of different ingredients related to them. So we actually have two different posts. One directly answering the question of, is polyvinyl alcohol a environmental concern? And another.
And so just to confirm, the pods are made from the PVA. That's why.
So that's the plastic coating on the outside. And so the beauty of that is, different detergents have different pros and cons. They're good at different things. And so it allows you to keep your dry and wet ingredients separate because they're coated in this polyvinyl alcohol as a pod until you want them to mix, which is when you're doing the washing. And so now that you're washing, you dissolve that polymer and it allows the wet and dry ingredients to mix and they can both do their optimal job. Because prior to this, you had to choose, am I going to use a powder or am I going to use a liquid?
Right.
And so this really allows people to have their cake and eat it too, while also decreasing on transportation costs and distribution costs because they're very light. They take up generally less space on a shelf. I mean, there's a lot of good that goes on there.
I have them that's what I use. I use both dishwasher pods and I also use laundry pods. So yeah.
Same.
It's like a convenience thing, so
you just throw one in,
Exactly. Sorry, you were mid-thought and I
No, so I was just going to say we addressed that perspective of are these pods causing an environmental concern? And are there ingredients in the detergent that might result in something called leaky gut, which we could talk about later if we wanted. I mean,
yes, I do have a question about that because I have seen many a social media post about that. But okay, so I'm going to actually read some questions that we've received from followers. So on the topic of the dishwasher pod specifically, people are concerned about, do these release plastic into my children's food? Could it enter my body and show up in my breast milk, for those who have young infants? And could my kids be eating dissolved plastic off of their dinner plates?
Again, I really empathize with people that are looking at this information and wrestling with these questions, especially as it pertains to kids. I mean, I've got 3 little kids, and although they are absolutely disgusting at times, I love them to the moon and back.
Little petri dishes.
Yeah. But and we just want our loved ones to be safe. So let me first say this: when used as intended, as directed, I have 0 concerns. So these plastics are very readily dissolved, especially in hot water, which a dishwasher produces. Then there's several rinsing steps that occur within a dishwasher. And so, is it possible that a stray molecule or 2 might still be around? Sure, but nothing in a meaningful amount that could cause harm. I really want to be very clear that I have no concerns. I use them for myself and my loved ones. And so that is just not something, of all of the things that I worry about, that's not in the top million on the list.
Okay. Well, then I guess similarly, what about the laundry detergent pods? Because we're not eating the things that are that are coming out of our laundry machine, but we're wearing them. They go on our bodies,
Yep.
different types of exposures. And then, as you mentioned, the main source is air, right?
Mhm.
For plastic exposure. So I'm just thinking, when I then take my stuff out of the wash and put it in the dryer,
Yeah.
anyway, just can we talk specifically about laundry pods now?
Yeah, sure. It's largely the same conclusion here. So when the pod dissolves,
Hmm.
the different polymer strands of that polyvinyl alcohol go into the water. Okay, so
Okay.
there's not particles of this polymer that you're ingesting. It's not as though we put a water bottle through a wood chipper and then ate the pieces.
Hmm.
It is mixed within the water that then gets drained and rinsed and sometimes rinsed again. And so anything that's left is very, very minute, and it does not rise to a level of safety concern.
So then, follow-up question, because I've seen a lot of posts, I've seen a lot of articles about, microplastics being detected. And sorry, now I'm switching, I guess, back to
No, you're
dishwasher.
good.
I don't know what I'm switching to,
You're
but
good.
to microplastics being detected in breast milk. And I, as you said, I 100% empathize, especially when it comes to a little infant. They're so little and new and fragile. But I'm wondering if those studies, we're talking about different microplastics from PVAs. Is that right?
Yeah, yes. So I saw one study. This would have been maybe a year ago or so, specifically looking at breast milk, and they claim to have found a PVA particle in the breast milk, and it showed up as like a plastic bead. I mean, you could like see it with the naked eye. And first, let me say, if you're eating something that big, I don't care if it's plastic, it's going in one end and out the other. That can't be absorbed by the body. And so there is PVA that is used in detergent pods that dissolves, but there's also PVA that is used in other uses that doesn't dissolve. And that is actually dependent on the amount of those OH groups that are on the plastic. So I
Okay.
said if you're at the upper 80 to mid 90% of that polymer is covered in those OHs, you go up past that, it no longer dissolves. And
Hmm.
so you can see that type of plastic used in, I think I've seen it in like fishing nets, and things that interact with water but are insoluble. Uh, and so what I will say is that at least that study that I looked at, it was one sample and it was a very, very large piece. I'm very unconvinced that that would come from a pod.
Hmm.
And it was probably potential plastic contamination either from the vessel it was in or the collection method. And so I've not seen any data looking at breast milk that would cause me to be concerned about the health and safety of little kiddo.
Okay, that's good to hear. All right, you mentioned that you just touched on this idea that the viral claim that dishwasher detergents can cause leaky gut. And I
Yeah,
know that your group has addressed that directly. So talk to me.
yeah. I am what we refer to as an immunotoxicologist by training, which is just a fancy way of saying I study the way chemicals change the way your immune system works. I don't know if people know this or not, but roughly like 70% of the immune system is either lives in or is in contact with your gut, which is a good thing,
Hmm.
because we ingest stuff from the outside environment and it goes inside of our bodies, and we want our defenses there to keep us safe. So inside of your gut are just inordinate amounts of bacteria and microbes, um, and they're kept there through the gut epithelium. They have these things called tight junctions, which are just uh, cells that are butted up against one another that don't allow stuff through. Okay, so the premise of leaky gut is they start to let stuff through. It leaks out of the gut into your blood, and you can end up with some inflammation and other things. Well, we saw an increase in concern from people on the internet that an ingredient in dishwasher detergents, it's a chemical called an ethoxylate, can break down those tight junctions,
Okay.
presumably causing leaky gut. That would be bad. So I pulled the manuscript, the peer-reviewed manuscript, and there are a lot of caveats to the conclusions made. So first off, we're just looking at what we refer to as an in vitro model or cells in a dish. And the cell that they used is a colorectal cancer cell. So it's a cell, it is a cell that will live forever. We can use it for experiments over and over and over again, which is why it gets used. But most people don't have a colon made up completely of cancer. And so right off the bat, we have an issue of relevance. This is not healthy tissue. This is inherently changed so that way it will live forever. Because believe it or not, our cells are completely are turned over all the time, and so they die, they get replaced, and so that's a problem. And then remember the dose makes the poison, right? So this paper is using sometimes hundreds of times more chemical than you would be exposed to from a dishwasher. Then on top of that, they just let it sit on top of the cells for hours. Which again, even if you were to ingest something, not how it's going to work inside the body. And so what we have is a situation where the model really doesn't mimic human biology very well at all. Mm-hmm. And then on top of it, they're making claims about inflammation. Well, the primary driver of inflammation in the body is the immune system. There's zero immune cells present in this paper. So it's really hard to say something is occurring when you don't have the cells there to measure it. And so ultimately what we concluded was, from the jump, we have a system that doesn't mimic human healthy biology. We have concentrations of chemicals that are exorbitant in their amount, which doesn't mimic human exposure. And then we're drawing conclusions from cells that in a normal situation are incapable of driving the response we're claiming. So they're incapable of producing inflammation, and yet we're making conclusions about inflammation.
Also, just real quick before we move on, my understanding is that leaky gut is not a medically recognized.
It's not.
Condition.
It is a influencer recognized condition, and so it is not a AMA recognized anything.
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, phew, you just allayed a lot of concerns there. So, all right, shifting from human health, let's just talk a little bit about the environment.
Sure.
There's a lot going on. I don't know if it was the state of Massachusetts or just our town, but they just, I think outlawed the use of plastic bags. And now we can only use, paper bags at the grocery store, for example. I tend to think that's good because I see, the plastic bags ending up in the ocean and all that. We do not want to see that. But what is first of all, is there an actual definition of biodegradable? What does that mean? And then what are our concerns? Speaking again about these dishwasher pods or the laundry pods, are we concerned about their environmental impact?
So first, the biodegradable question. This actually is a regulated term. And so if you look at the EPA definition, I believe, is that it has to be broken down in the environment within a year. But then there's other organizations, which, for instance, the OECD, which is, I always get this wrong, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, I believe. But
that sounds right.
It is a group of 35 or 37 countries that have come together and said, we need to standardize the way we test things, look at things, think about things. So that way we don't have to measure or go about the process 37 different times. We can agree about doing it one way, look at it, and use it across the board. So it's a way to kind of streamline and standardize. And so they break down with a little more granularity But if it's like highly biodegradable, it's within 28 days, and then it goes down from there to non-biodegradable. So if a certain percentage is within 28 days, but not 100%, then it's a tick down on the ladder, so on and so forth. So saying something is biodegradable is actually
it means something.
It does. It
Right.
is a metric that matters.
Okay. And now, how concerned are we about these pods, for example?
Yeah. So again, there was a paper that came out, I think it was in 2021. It actually claimed that it was like 67% of PVA from pods doesn't break down in the environment. And again, sounds very concerning. So we step in, read the paper, and the paper actually doesn't measure any PVA. What it does is it uses computer modeling. Mm-hmm. So it says, okay, we have a algorithm we can use to, if we put in our assumptions and we say, okay, we assume this much of PVA is going into a water system, we assume these different conditions, what is the prediction on what will come out the other end? This is actually something that's very commonly used because computers are very, very helpful. They can look at a lot of things all at once that it just is not feasible for people to do. Mm-hmm. But two things. One, data coming out is only as good as the data going in.
Yep.
We refer to that as garbage in, garbage out.
Yep.
And then additionally, a lot of times what people will do is they'll say, well, the computer predicts this outcome. Let's test it and see if that outcome actually occurs. That second step, that validation, wasn't in the paper. So it just said the computer predicts this.
And the paper was saying that these PVAs are, you said
that it just is not going to break down in the environment.
Okay, got it.
And so, well, that's something that can be measured. Mm-hmm. We can go to wastewater treatment plants. We can design experiments to test that exact question. And believe it or not, that had already happened. And so what we found, if you look at what we refer to as like a weight of evidence approach, which is a way where you say, okay, give me all of the information available on a topic. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to put that into tiers based on, is it relevant? Are they using appropriate doses? Are they using appropriate models? Right. So that way different studies get slightly different weight depending on how well they were done. Mm-hmm. And then you look at all that information and you say, okay, well, the overwhelming weight of this evidence says this nuanced conclusion. And so when you do that, we actually see that, yes, it does break down. The overwhelming amount of evidence in the literature shows that when it enters a wastewater treatment plant, it being polyvinyl alcohol or PVA, and that plant has seen PVA in the past, what it does is the ecosystem of microbes that live in that plant have been selected to gobble up the PVA. And so within a very short amount of time, it is broken down and not an issue. Nothing burger. Yep.
Wow, because that article got picked up and was causing all kinds of problems.
The amount of questions I've had to answer on that article over the last few years has been quite large.
Wow. All right. Well, just starting to wrap up here, we as consumers are obviously and understandably concerned about our kids, about our own health, about the environment. First of all, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think is important for consumers to know? Or are there certain things that we can be on the lookout for or should be on the lookout for when it comes to those things?
Yeah, so I think one thing that I really try to impress upon people, specifically around micro and nanoplastics, is that, yes, we can detect them. Yes, we know that they, in some instances, can end up in tissues in our body. You might have heard, I don't know, maybe about a year ago, the viral claim of you have a plastic spoon in your brain. First off, I don't believe it. and mostly because we actually often have a very hard time differentiating between plastic and you, because we're made of the same things, which is mostly carbon. And so differentiating and knowing where you stop and something else starts is a very difficult process. And so we know that, yes, you can see all the headlines of, well, plastics have been associated with fill in the blank bad outcome. Although that's true, we have seen increases in the detection in tissues. We have zero causative evidence. Two things happening at the same time don't mean one thing caused the other.
Correlation does not equal causation.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm not arguing and saying that we should be completely unconcerned. I'm saying we need to not draw conclusions until we have enough evidence to draw the conclusion. And so if you're concerned, there are steps you can take. If you want, you could use a metal or a glass water bottle. If that's an area where you're concerned. If you want to store food in glass containers, that is an area that is completely within your agency to change. But know that if you don't or aren't, you're not doing anything wrong. You bear no blame. This isn't there's no morality in chemistry. It is simply there. And so that I really try to tell people that it's okay. We have no evidence saying that what's happening is hurting you or your children. And we are doing the very best we can to answer those questions. And in the meantime, all I can ask for is patience.
I'm so glad that you said that, because there really is so much guilt and shame and blame, particularly geared toward parents. I would even argue towards moms in particular. So I appreciate that. You're not failing your children.
No.
You're not poisoning your children. There are some small practical steps that maybe you can take over time if that's possible for you. But yeah, I'm with you on that. So thank you for saying that. Well, I learned so much from you. There's so much more that we could have talked about, so we might need to have you back to talk more. And we are definitely going to link to the Center for Research on Ingredient Safety, Chris, at Michigan State. Incredible resource. Everyone should subscribe. We will definitely go ahead and link to all the amazing things on our show notes. Dr. Joe Zagorski, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun, and hopefully we can do it again.
Awesome. And a special thank you to the American Cleaning Institute for sponsoring today's episode. Thank you to our listeners. We hope you learned a thing or two. Be sure to tune in next week for your trusted source for no nonsense, just science.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.